Well, good morning, everybody. It's Tom Gurr with Pacific Technology Alliance. I am here with U.S. Representative Cathy McMorris Rodgers. Cathy is from the 5th District of Washington, Spokane, Washington. Cathy, we really appreciate you taking a couple minutes to visit with us today. And today we're going to chat about rural connectivity and particularly some legislation that Cathy's part of. But before we dive into that, I wanted to just quickly ask you about sort of the pressing issue of the day, get a sense from you of the federal response around COVID-19 and what that's meant for your district and your constituents and how you see that shaping up.
Thanks, Tom. Clearly, this is a very serious issue. We have a public health crisis that is also an economic crisis. And the federal response combined with the state response, the local response has all been so important. I've been encouraged as I have participated in the local emergency management meetings, the state management meetings. Nearly every day, the delegation has been meeting with the governor and or his office. I've participated in a number of calls and conference calls at the federal level with the administration, with my colleagues. I've been encouraged that people across the board are taking very seriously where we find ourselves. As you know, Congress responded very quickly with the very first phase. We've now passed 3 phases of legislation to address both the public health crisis as well as the economic crisis. The very first phase was really focused on testing, more than $8 billion in emergency funding that was made available to local and state officials, focused on testing and reimbursing for the cost of getting that rolled out. Phase 2 built upon that, making sure that no matter if you're on Medicare, Medicaid, private health insurance, that the cost of COVID-19 would be covered. And then, as you know, the last phase that was recently signed into law was really about providing fast relief to those in Eastern Washington who need it most, as well as people all across this country. There's $350 billion in forgivable loans to small businesses who maintain their payroll, recognizing that as the government has responded to this public health crisis, resulted in big parts of our economy being shut down. And that's where we need to make sure that we are providing that relief to keep as many people employed as possible and keep businesses open, not closed down.
Yeah, that's great, and I'm glad to hear some good news there, and that's happening, and appreciate your efforts on that. So I wanted to open with that, but we're here to talk, as I mentioned at the top of the conversation, about rural connectivity and your efforts around rural connectivity. For those of you who don't know, Cathy's been part of multiple events that we have held where we focused on rural connectivity and sort of how we bridge the digital divide. We hosted an event in Colville last summer where Cathy was our keynote speaker, and she did a tremendous job. But a big hot topic at that event was the whole notion of FCC mapping and some of the gaps that exist there. Microsoft has done a tremendous amount of work here that has really exposed some of these gaps, and really it's significant because the maps that the FCC produces is what ultimately guides some of the funding and how we decide to bridge the digital divide. So Cathy's taken this issue on, has really been the tip of the spear here with her Broadband Data Improvement Act that she pushed so hard for. Now, the good news is that the Broadband Data Improvement Act was included, or some portions of it were included in a final bill, the Broadband Data Act S1822 that was signed into law here recently. I think that's a tremendous accomplishment. Wanted to say congratulations. So tell us a little bit about what some of your goals were related to this bill and what got included and how this might help improve the economy, public safety, education, healthcare, and maybe future responses to situations like what we see today in rural communities throughout your district.
Yes, Tom. Thank you for highlighting this legislation, and really appreciate the work that you have done all across the state to highlight the importance of broadband and being connected no matter where you live. Really appreciated you making the trip to Colville. It was a great session, lots of people who came out that summit, that broadband summit, to highlight this issue. And I am encouraged that the legislation, a big portion of the legislation, the Broadband Data Act was actually included in, well, the Broadband Improvement Act was included in the Broadband Data Act that was included in phase 3. So we're getting signed into law legislation that is going to help in the future as well as right now. This global pandemic has highlighted even further the importance of connectivity at a time when businesses are being shut down or working from home. Kids are home because schools are closed, and they're on the internet. They're getting their instruction off of the internet, and the importance of having a connection is so important. I've talked to school administrators throughout Eastern Washington who are really challenged because they have a big percentage of their kids that are at home without an internet connection. From a healthcare perspective, phase 3 of the coronavirus response included a big expansion of telehealth. Again, it is critical for rural areas to be connected in order to take advantage of telehealth. So all of this underscores the importance of getting a broadband connection, getting rural and underserved areas connected. And so the mapping legislation is important because the maps that we've been using in order to approve projects and fund projects, the maps have been really off. I represent 10 counties in Eastern Washington, and when you look at the maps that the FCC is using to award funding, or the USDA Rural Development, it will show that Ferry County's 97% covered, Stevens County's 100% covered, Pend Oreille County's 100% covered, Spokane County's 100% covered, and it's just not true. Certainly in these rural areas, it is not even close. I kind of joke that Ferry County is probably the opposite, 3% is covered. But even in Spokane County, you get outside of the city of Spokane, even 15, 20 miles south of Spokane in Rockford and Fairfield, they don't have a connection. So we need to get the maps right. And that's why this legislation was so important, because as the federal government is committing billions of dollars to ensure that rural and underserved areas are covered, we need to make sure that the maps are accurate so that the money actually goes to where the greatest need is. So this was work that was started months ago. A bipartisan effort in the House as well as in the Senate that now has been signed into law, and I was really pleased to see it happen.
Well, again, congratulations there. That's great. And you know, rural communities face a lot of challenges, particularly around connectivity. And I know this, as you mentioned, is a major area of focus for you. What are some of the other efforts that are underway or things that you're working on related to rural connectivity? And sort of number one, and number two, how can your constituents, consumers, folks in your district who care about this issue, how can they get further engaged, and how can they participate in the process to help get their community wired?
Great questions. I've seen several examples in Eastern Washington where the community itself is really taking the lead. And I would encourage people, if you live in an area where you need a connection, get involved with your Chamber of Commerce, get involved with the Economic Development Committee. There's also other organizations. There's a statewide rural broadband office that's been created now that is focused on ensuring that we get this digital divide closed. It's probably the number one issue. It is the number one issue that I hear as I get around Eastern Washington, visit communities. It is the importance of rural broadband, getting connected, because as I said, it is critical to education, to our economic future, to healthcare, telehealth, delivering healthcare in the future. And this coronavirus and the pandemic has only underscored that more. So there are solutions that are being developed at the local level that I would encourage people to engage, but also get in touch with my office. I I am hosting gatherings. I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to identify the need and then go to work to meet that need. There's more funds that are being made available, and with the accurate maps, we'll be able to direct that funding to the areas that need it most.
Well, that's great. Thank you again. So I also want to encourage folks to stay engaged with us. This is an issue we're very closely following. You can follow us at Facebook and Twitter, both of which are at PACTech, at PACTECH. And you can follow us on our website at pacifictechnology.org. Cathy, I really appreciate you taking a few minutes to chat with us about this issue. It's such a critical issue, and I appreciate you taking the time. Please give my best to your family and to your staff. And everybody stay safe and be well. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Good to be with you, Tom. Stay safe.
All right, we'll talk soon.